We talked about this last week, ladies. Not you. Get sit down. I'm sorry? No. Now, the first bell's already rung. Are you going to come in and cause trouble, Karen? Yeah, apparently so. While Karen visits, do we have anybody that we need to specifically add to the prayer list this morning? Jay? Jay Plunkett? Yeah. And Cherry. Anyone else? Jim? Yep. Amen. Thank you. Okay, we're going to pick up with chapter 17 this morning. So turn to 17 of Isaiah. This section in Isaiah, the chapters seem to be relatively short. I guess the only thing I can think of is that Isaiah just simply recounted his prophecy and set it aside and went on to another one. And that's assuming, of course, the translators did a good job in doing chapter breaks. So it's 14 verses, so I'm going to go ahead and read it to get started, and then we'll come back and tear it apart. The oracle concerning Damascus. Behold, Damascus is about to be removed from being a city, and it will become a fallen ruin. The cities of Aurora are forsaken. They will be for flocks to lie down in, and there will be no one to frighten them. The fortified city will disappear from Ephraim, and sovereignty from Damascus, and the remnant of Aram. They will be like the glory of the sons of Israel, declares the Lord of hosts. Now it will come about in that day that the glory of Jacob will fade, and the fatness of his flesh will become lean. And it will be even like the reaper gathering the standing grain, or as his arm harvests the ears. Or it will be like one gleaning ears of grain in the valley of Rephaim. Yet gleanings will be left in it like the shaking of an olive tree, 2 or 3 olives on the topmost bough, 4 or 5 in the branches of a fruitful tree, declares the Lord, the God of Israel. In that day man will have regard for his Maker, and his eyes will look to the Holy One of Israel. And he will not have regard for the altars, the work of his hands, nor will he look to that which his fingers have made. Even the Asherim and incense stands. In that day their strong cities will be like forsaken places in the forest, or like branches which they abandoned before the sons of Israel, and the land will be a desolation. For you have forgotten the God of your salvation, and have not remembered the rock of your refuge. Therefore you plant delightful plants, and set them with vine slips of a strange God. In the day that you plant it, you carefully fence it in. And in the morning you bring your seed to blossom, but the harvest will be a heap in the day of sickliness and incurable pain. Okay, this prophecy deals in 2 parts. It deals in Damascus and then it deals in Judah. So let's go back to the beginning and talk about Damascus. In verse 1, it calls out the oracle concerning Damascus. And so if we were to look at this literally, we would think that the city of Damascus is all that's involved in here. But Damascus was the capital of what nation? Assyria. And so the context really speaks to the entire country. And again, that comes into other prophecies that Isaiah has talked about, the Assyrians. Why would he single out Damascus? Does anybody know? It was an old city, without a doubt. Yep. Well, that's certainly part of it. And of course, Damascus was the capital of Assyria. Yeah. Yeah. But Damascus was also probably the most blatantly and most flagrantly idolatrous city that was in existence at that time. History tells us that Damascus had 365 streets with an idol on each one of them. Now, why 365? One for every day of the year. And every one of those idols had its day assigned to it. And so the Damascens would go around and they would worship that idol on its specific day or specified day. And this would just continue all year round. So it kind of gives you a picture of what you're looking at here when you think in terms of the Assyrians and Damascus. And I mean, it's easy to point our fingers, but our society is becoming, if not as idolatrous. We just need to open our eyes and see the idolatry that's going on, but that's a whole nother time. Okay, chronologically, this prophecy is considered to have been delivered shortly after the 7th and 8th of the prophecies from the 7th and 8th chapters, somewhere around the beginning of the reign of Ahaz, and was fulfilled in Tilgath-Pileser's taking of Damascus and carrying the captives to Kir. Okay, Kir. That should sound familiar, because that's one of the cities that keeps popping up, and we just saw it in some previous chapters. And of course, Kir is in Babylon. Let's take a couple side trips here. Let's go to 2 Kings 16. Okay, verses 8 and 9. Ahaz also took the silver and gold found in the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's palace, and he sent it as a gift to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria responded to him, marched up to Damascus, and captured it. He took its people to Kir as captives and put Rezin to death. And so again, what you're seeing is you're seeing Isaiah prophesying, you're seeing other books in the Old Testament reciting history. So we see the prophecies fulfilled. We also find it in 2 Chronicles 28, verse 21. Although Ahaz had taken a portion from the house of the Lord, from the royal palace, and from the princes, and had presented it to the king of Assyria, it did not help him. Okay? So this is all the pieces of the puzzle that tie this together. Tilgath-Pileser overran a great part of the kingdom of Israel and carried them into captivity as well. So that's how all of this helps tie together in terms of the prophecy. Okay. Verse 2, the cities of Aurora. So apparently, this cities of Aurora is a phrase that's under some scrutiny. Most translations keep to this read as a specific city or a group of cities with a couple of notable exceptions. And these are very old translations too, the Aramaic Bible in plain English. And the cities of Adur shall be forsaken, and they shall be for flocks that will lie down, and it shall not be harmful to them. The Brenton Septuagint translation, abandoned forever to be a fold and resting place for flocks. There shall be none to go after them. And so a few of the other versions vary from this Aurora. What was interesting is I could find nothing on Adur that shows up in this Aramaic translation. Google just sent me in all kinds of different directions with nothing that tied back to Adur. So I'm thinking that Adur is unique to the Aramaic translation in using that word. Generally, it implies that it's more of a descriptive term than an actual physical location. So just kind of the cities, the whole of Assyria will fall this way. So just kind of things to keep in mind when you read through this. Verse 3. The fortified city will disappear from Ephraim, and sovereignty from Damascus, and the remnant of Aram. They will be like the glory of the sons of Israel. Okay, so the New Jerusalem Bible reads this: Ephraim will be stripped of its defenses, and Damascus of its sovereignty. And the remnant of Aram will be treated like the glory of the Israelites, declares Yahweh Sabaoth. Okay, what's being said there? If we look at all of those things together, what's the message there? It's really not hidden. Yeah. They're going to go by the wayside. There's a couple things I found interesting in here, though. One is the reference to like the glory of Jacob. Okay. The other thing is it uses the remnants of Aram. Who was Aram? Children's teachers, Bible teachers, probably know who this is more than most of us. Who Aram was. Aram, A-R-A-M. He was the grandson of Noah. He was Shem's son. Okay, that's why I said children's Bible teachers may have a better idea of that than most of us. So the remnant of Aram would indirectly refer to whom? To the Israelites, right? Because Noah restarted everything. And from Noah, we can go down through the lineage and find Abram, and then from Abram, Isaac, Jacob, the nation of Israel. So that's kind of the picture that's here. The glory of they will be like the glory of the sons of Israel. Why would such an ironic statement be used like that? Think of who this is. This is Isaiah. He's sitting in the city. He's writing his prophecies. What has already happened? What has already happened to the other the 10 northern tribes? Yeah, they've already been overrun and taken into captivity. So Isaiah is sitting in the last stronghold of the nation of Israel. Okay, now just a few hundred years before, when Joshua went into the promised land, Israel was arguably the most powerful country in the world because they followed what God, for the most part, what God told them to do until Joshua stepped down anyway. So all of that glory, that history, all of that storytelling, what I mean by storytelling is that repeated in the family homes night after night after night about Joshua, about Moses, about Aaron, about all of those things. All of that glory is what? It's gone. Okay, now Assyria was the most powerful country at this point in time. So when Isaiah talks about they will be like the glory of Jacob, it means they're going to go away too. That all of their bragging will be historical. It won't be contemporary. And Isaiah says this comes from whom? Who's this coming from? I'm sorry, Bobby? So this is not Isaiah shooting his mouth off. This is Isaiah pronouncing God's will and what's going to happen. Now, historically, we see that. We went over this a few weeks ago, where you see about 100 years later, the Assyrians being destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. Okay? All right. Any other comments before we make the switch here? All right, at this point, this chapter switches from focusing on the Assyrians to focusing on Judah. The fatness of his flesh will become lean. That is to me, such a colorful picture. What does that mean? When they talk about the fatness, I lost it here. The fatness of his flesh. What does that imply? Well, it will become lean, yeah. The fatness of his flesh would imply all of the blessings and the richness will become lean. They're going to lose all of that. Okay. What was one of the, probably many, prideful things that the Jews continued to stand on, and to this day still do? Abraham, but even more so than that. Yes, that they were the chosen people. They still stood on all of this, and of course that comes from being the descendants of Abraham. Okay. And standing on all of this, Isaiah is telling them, it's all going away. Okay. All right, verse 6. What is verse 6 talking about? Yeah. Yeah. He continues this thought that he's carried through entire book, that there'll be a remnant. And that's what he's referring to. When you shake it, now he calls an olive tree. Why does he refer to an olive tree? It was one of the most common fruit trees in the area, and still is. Yeah. That's not by accident there either. Now, it's not a direct reference back to Isaiah, but it's because everybody knew what an olive tree looked like and how they fruited and everything else. I have an olive tree that I still can't get to fruit, so. Not sure what that's supposed to be saying, but anyway. Okay, so when you shake a fruit tree and the fruit's ripe, does it all come down? No, no matter how hard you shake it. There's always a few fruit left. I have a pear tree that does that. The problem is those pears are about like this and they hurt. But no matter how hard you shake it, no matter how hard the wind blows, there's always a little bit of fruit left. And that's the message Isaiah is passing on here, is that there will be a remnant, no matter how much destruction happens. Okay. Yeah. 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 God promised that. And we're here today as a result of that. Verse 7 uses an interesting phrase. In that day, man will have regard for his maker. Why would that comment be made in this context? What happens in times of distress and trouble? What do we do? What do we have a tendency to do as human beings? Yeah. The bigger the problems, the more time we spend on our knees, huh? Yeah. And so that's what Isaiah is telling them. So they're in for a whole lot of trouble, and it's going to cause them to finally turn to where they need to be turning. Now the question is, from what are they turning? Yeah. The Jews were caught up in all of this idolatry as well. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry?
Persecution brings revival.
It does. It does. So I guess we should, fear? Fear is a tremendous motivator. No. Yeah. Okay. And you would think at this point that the Jews, or what's left of the Jews that were in Judah, would have woke up. You would think. They've seen all the other 10 tribes taken away. They've got Assyria knocking on their door on a regular basis. You've got Isaiah telling them, it's coming, it's coming. You had the other minor prophets preaching to other parts of the nation that Wade brought us a study on, teaching the exact same thing. No.
They're just like us.
Exactly.
They're at the mountain, and 40 days later they're worshiping a golden calf and just happening to pop out of the fire.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet I don't think we learn from those object lessons either. Okay. All right. In fact, the rest of this chapter deals with idol worship and the work of their hands. 10 and 11, you find some allegorical references to idol worship. For you've forgotten the God of your salvation and have not remembered the rock of your refuge. I want to grab that real quick there. Again, this is being written by Isaiah around 700 BC. When we see the term rock, where do we find that reference? To Jesus, doesn't it? When we look in the New Testament, the rock refers to Jesus. Okay. It's interesting, to me anyway, that Isaiah would use that reference in this allegory. Therefore you plant delightful plants and set them with vine slips of a strange God. To me, the disdain coming from Isaiah that you can almost hear in making this allegory. And in the morning you bring your seed to blossom, but the harvest will heap in a day of sickliness and incurable pain. So all of this time, again, this is that allegory that deals with idol worship. Okay. 12 and 13. Uproars of many peoples who roar like the roaring of the seas and the rumbling of nations. All of this hoopla, God can just squash out. Okay. Verse 14 does take a slightly different implication. And, most of the scholars talk about verse 14 referring to Sennacherib. So, okay. Any comments? Okay. All right. All right, let's get into 18 then. We're probably going to get about halfway through. Okay. 18, virtually all of the scholars. Clark calls it the most obscure prophecy in the book of Isaiah. I saw that same usage of language from a few other commentators as well. Why? It seems to be out of place in here. This is not a prophecy of condemnation that we find in chapter 18. It refers to a whole different nation that all of a sudden is just popping up on the radar. There are some interesting things about this nation, though. The nation shows up. In fact, you don't really see who the nation is, I guess depending on your version, because I don't even see it in this one. It is in the King James. It comes out and tells us. This chapter is about Ethiopia. Does anybody have any historical knowledge about Ethiopia at this time frame? They were also considered almost as powerful as the Assyrians in this time frame. They were the chief rivals, which I didn't know. Yeah. Yeah. That I did not find, but then I didn't do a lot of research specifically on the Ethiopians, the Cushites, but I wasn't aware that they were that powerful at this time. And so understanding that helps you understand some of this prophecy that's in chapter 18. Who was the greatest enemy of the Israelites, of what was left of the Israelites? The Assyrians. Okay, we've been talking about it for 16 chapters. There's an old phrase. It says, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." So that helps you understand why the Ethiopians would come to the Israelites. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we look into chapter 18. Alas, O the land of whirring wings, which lies behind the rivers of Cush, which sends envoys by the sea, even in papyrus vessels on the surface of the waters. Go, swift messengers, to a nation tall and smooth, to a people feared far and wide, a powerful and oppressive nation whose land the rivers divide. All you inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the earth, as soon as a standard is raised on the mountains, you will see it. As soon as the trumpet is blown, you will hear it. For thus the Lord has told me. Let me stop right here. Okay, so in the day, they were ruling Egypt, chief rival. Okay. Okay, this came from Grogan. In 715 BC, which, again, Isaiah was alive till about 695 BC. So this would have been in Isaiah's time. An Ethiopian named Shebako gained control of Egypt as founder of the 25th dynasty. Ethiopian domination continued until 633 BC, when a native Egyptian regained the throne. The term designates a much larger area than present-day Ethiopia, an area including Sudan and Somalia, which again comes back to the overall conquest of the Cushites. So I never appreciated world history as a child. I'm beginning to really, really appreciate world history. So this is what you see in this time frame. The Ethiopians came to or sent envoys to the Israelites asking them to join forces with them. Okay. The Nile Valley happens to be known for its buzzing insects, and that's about as far as it went into. My immediate thought was locusts, but apparently it extends far beyond that. Crisscrossing rivers. Okay. We find that actually in my version here, it says, whose land the rivers divide. In the King James, it says crisscrossing rivers. How do we know this is not a reference to the Garden of Eden? No, in terms of when it talks about the crisscrossing rivers. How do we know that's not a reference? Okay, what rivers still exist from the description of the garden? Tigris and Euphrates. Okay. Where are they? Mm-hmm. They're in Iraq. Okay. This is talking about Ethiopia, which is down in Africa. That that would have to cross, now, Iraq is northeast. It would have to cross the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea. It's about 1,700 miles difference. So that's how we know that this is not referring or making any reference to the Garden of Eden. Geographically, it just can't happen. So. Okay. We talked about it. Why was the alliance to the Ethiopians rejected? We'll find, let's go back and read it. Maybe that might be a little easier then. Picking up with verse 4. For thus the Lord has told me, I will look from my dwelling place quietly, like dazzling heat in the sunshine, like a cloud of dew in the heat of harvest. For before the harvest, as soon as the bud blossoms and the flower becomes a ripening grape, then he will cut off the sprigs with pruning knives and remove and cut away the spreading branches, and they will be left together for mountain birds of prey, and for the beasts of the earth, and the birds of prey will spend the summer feeding on them, and all the beasts of the earth will spend harvest time on them, and that a gift of homage will be brought to the Lord of hosts from a people tall and smooth, even from a people feared far and wide, a powerful and oppressive nation, whose the land the rivers divide, to the place of the name of the Lord of hosts, even Mount Zion. Okay. So why was the alliance rejected? Or the offer of an alliance rejected? And again, the King James has a slightly different read. Yeah. Yeah. This really gets more basic when it comes down to it. Could very well have played in it. Could very well have played in it. In the wilderness, who fed the Israelis, the Israelites? God did. In conquering the Promised Land, who made sure they were victorious? Not a rhetorical question. God did. Okay. Why was the alliance rejected? What would the Israelites have done if they had accepted the alliance and the Ethiopians had defeated the Assyrians? Yeah. They would have been inclined to assimilate themselves into Ethiopian culture, into the Cushite culture. By rejecting this alliance, God told them, I'm good enough. I can handle it on my own. I don't need these people. And that's the message that's coming across here. Telling the Israelites, relax, I got it. So. Verse 7 got me into an interesting side study here. Verse 7 calls for the Ethiopians to worship God. Okay. It's real possible that this prophecy was partially fulfilled in the time frame. However, we know the prophecy was fulfilled. Okay, y'all fast forward into the New Testament. How do we know the prophecy was fulfilled? Acts 8. Acts 8. Go to 8:26. This actually should be a real familiar passage. Beginning in verse 26. Now an angel of the Lord said to Philip, go south to the road, the desert road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza. So he started out, and on his way he met an Ethiopian eunuch, an important official in charge of all the treasury of Kandake, which means Queen of the Ethiopians. This man had gone to Jerusalem to worship, and on his way home was sitting in his chariot reading the book of Isaiah the prophet. Who noticed that before? Who noticed that the eunuch was reading the book of Isaiah? Because I didn't. Did you? Did you pick that out? No. It's not, it's further on in there, but I guess I never put two and two together. It never really called out that he was reading Isaiah to me. The Spirit told Philip, "Go to that chariot and stay near it." Then Philip ran up to the chariot and heard the man reading Isaiah the prophet. Do you understand what you are reading? Okay. Because chapter 18 prophesied that it would happen. That's why. And we can yeah. We could get into the real deep history, which I have not done that much research on it to show the actual transition and when it happened and all of this. But yeah, there was a whole lot of Jews that were in captivity alongside, and they did proselyte, a lot of them. But the fact of the matter is that a good number of Ethiopians began to practice Judaism. In this example, though, there was a couple more things that kind of stuck out at me. Philip was not surprised that the eunuch was an Ethiopian. You don't see any inference or any influence in here that Philip was the least bit reserved about approaching this man because he was an Ethiopian. And that was something else that never really occurred to me until I was putting this together. So again, that helps us understand that interfacing between the Jews and the Ethiopians, particularly those that were proselyted and practicing Judaism, was a common thing. To me, it was also interesting, and I guess I didn't really pay that much attention prior. I was focused more on the baptism side of this example than I was of the historical side of this. But this eunuch was in charge of the treasury of the Queen of Ethiopians. Yeah, this guy was wealthy or had access to a great deal of wealth. And
that also shows that Philip going up to that chariot was blessed by God, because the guard wouldn't let him.
yeah, he would not have been traveling alone, no. No. I guess it helps give us some, okay, I don't want to misread any of this. Yes, God put his hands in there and made sure Philip could go there. But God also had his hand on Philip for a long time. Okay. It helps give us a little of the understanding of Philip as a human being, that he would be able to approach the chariot of the person in charge of the treasury of the queen. We set a lot of that aside, I think, when we look at these things, and we think of them in terms of our culture and our society. And we forget that there was a lot of wealth, a lot of power that God made sure that his people had access to in terms of influence, not in terms of being wealthy.
Archaeologists are now exploring ruins of temples from the conquistador times and the Crusades, when they went into Ethiopia and destroyed these pagan temples. And they're finding fragments of documents and deciphering the walls that have their texts obliterated. And they're finding it's not pagan, it's Christian.
Yeah.
So when one of the most powerful men in the nation becomes a Christian and comes back, what does he do? He leads a revival, and that nation, until the conquistadors came in, was a Christian nation.
Yep.
And I mean, that's what archaeologists are finding now.
Yep.
They point back to 2,000 years ago. Some of these temples are going back that far.
We actually get more into it in chapter 19, but it's interesting that it was the Ptolemies in Egypt that promoted the spread of Judaism. And they existed between 305 and 30 BC. Yeah. 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 Well, obviously, this is not the only time, because, yeah, you're talking about Daniel, and you're talking about, Daniel was put in that position. Name escaped me. Jacob, not Jacob. I'm sorry? Joseph, yeah. These men, these children of God were put in these positions for this remnant to happen. And through Isaiah, so many times we've already seen talking about lean times and hard times and all of these other things, but yet a remnant would exist. And that's exactly what is being spoken of. Yeah. Let's be perfectly clear, that is not the course of action we should take. Sir? Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to make sure I pointed out that no one got misunderstood that this had anything to do with referencing back to the garden. Yeah. You're talking about in Acts 8? Yeah. But yeah, there is this long, and I guess that's probably why there was no surprise when the Ethiopians offered this alliance at this time frame, because it was a long-standing relationship, an interaction of nations. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Bobby, would you close real quick for us? Amen. Thank you.